complexity. There are so many really awkward challenges that businesses face. It's a really, really complex world.
Because suddenly you have to not just kind of get along with the people that living next to you, but you have like this potential of being in contact with everybody.
To me, right now, managing complexity is one of the huge opportunities of our time.
That's where, at least from a mindset perspective, design can help. Creating clarity in this kind of fuzziness.
I do see a changing attitude towards companies in general, I have to say. If I look at where the progressive movements are happening, I would almost say like there's a bit of distrust when it comes to companies as organizations. It's about credibility, it's about being authentic. So, companies have a challenge there to stay relevant in that mindset. Yeah? You have to be very much aware of that kind of mindset and come up with proactive suggestions and solutions, and you still provide value in that context. In traditional marketing speak, I think the days of push marketing are definitely gone. I think if you want to stay relevant, you have to be in the places where good conversations, where interaction between people is actually happening, where changes in interactions can be observed. They will hardly end up just ringing the doorbell. Here I am. You have to go out. Yeah, you have to go out there and look for them.
I'd like to add one bit, just to listen to you. And maybe this is where design steps in as well a little bit. I think as a company you have to do things. You have to do experiments, because you can go there and watch. That's one way. That's an excellent way. But another thing is that you make something, you try, and you see if somebody likes it or not, or what they do with it. We have quite close relationships with our clients, and as such we grow actually to be quite adaptive. And to give you some examples, we used to sell printers. Well, that's not what they were asking for, so we started to sell prints. Well, that's actually what they were not asking for as well. So we started to give them the people who will take care of the prints and stuff like that. And nowadays, if you go to the University of Maastricht or the University of Amsterdam, we have complete sites of OC which will take care of the distribution and the making of the readers the students are using. We take care of providing the readers and all the problems involved. That's what OC does. Well, the only reason how we got there is by being adaptive.
So you need to get a grip on what is the dynamic context that you're designing for. What are the different users or actors? What are the systems that you need to interact with? What does the value chain look like? What position on the value chain do I want to keep, and where do I see a stretch? Where do I want to move towards? And who else am I going to encounter? Because we're all in the same dynamic context. That's a very interesting way of looking at the world, and it does require far more openness, because the whole the design trajectory is not as linear as it used to be. You can't predict upfront what the end result is going to be. That's the new challenge.
Like if most people think about design, and especially in the car industry, then it's about like, okay, how the car looks like. That's what they perceive as design. If you're like talking to someone from the industry, then they will typically ask you, are you interior or exterior? And maybe what we do is, it's quite different. I mean, like the first thing, maybe like the foremost and most important thing is we're not part of the design department. We're not placed in design. Design quite often is somehow squeezed between the marketing and sales. There is like a lot of things that have been already decided, and it has to get like a shape.
We define design as being something which has an impact on the business, like we're not doing it for the sake of just being aesthetic.
We are like based in research, what gives us the ability to act in the really beginning of the process. What differentiates us from like a classical design function, that we don't we're not in this kind of development process. We have like a certain function to fulfill, but we take the freedom of the research to explore things and find new things, but like relevant to the customers, because we work with the people really in close interaction. There's like this generation called Generation Golf, because it was like so tightly knit or integrated with this car. The car kind of became the symbol of the generation. Nowadays you see that more people are like having much more specific needs or like lifestyles. There's like, you have basically like many more different kind of streams than you had previously. You have more and more people that are not alike anymore.
We don't even look into market segmentations, but we really try to find more patterns among several quite diverse people, which we then assume that based on that we can scale it up.
What makes a good designer in our context is the ability to translate from one into the other one, translating a need or a desire of a customer into a business proposition, trying to translate a business capability into a product for a user. So it's like constantly balancing different perspectives, different aspects, and interpreting between different kind of domains or areas. I think that's in essence maybe what design in our practice means. In our experience, I wouldn't contrast business and design. We can also differentiate between two different kind of modes of working. One is more towards like redesigning, styling, improving something. The other one is, what we do is we're using design as a tool to create something new. I think in our perception, like an entrepreneur from a business context is closer to what we do, creating something new and innovative, than, for example, someone who's like redesigning or restyling something. So I wouldn't contrast business and design. I would rather maybe contrast, is someone trying to optimize something, or is someone trying to create something new?
Well, my name is Alex Osterwalder, and I'm passionate about business models, businesses, and how to create businesses. I was always interested in how businesses work and how they come to exist and what a company is all about. And business models is the topic that allows you to learn about businesses. So I just got into it and I started studying that for years. Big companies, they grow up usually with a business model that made them big. Now, what's happening in a lot of industries is that those business models are expiring. So they know that they have to create something new. Now, the big mistake that we're often making in large companies is we're trying to use the same mindset that we applied to create our business, to create a new business. What kind of growth do I want to create? And who can help me create that? And then you put the team together. And there's just no way around not having designers in that team when you're talking about creating new stuff and creating growth. That's the way I frame it. Aesthetics plays an important role in design, and that's the most obvious. So yes, at the beginning, that's what you see. That's the most visible part. And if you dig deeper, you see, well, aesthetics is one of the outcomes of the design process. And there's much more. For me, it's very simple. It's the tools and the techniques that people in the design profession, architects, product designers, that they use to create new things. That's, for me, design thinking. Applied to whatever issue. So if we talk about design thinking in business models, well, for me, it means, applying the techniques and tools that you already apply in design, applying those to the business model issue. You can train people to accept that failure will lead to success. That in a space where you're creating something new, you just don't know. So if you don't prototype, experiment, fail to learn, well, you're just maximizing your risk to fail big. designers, as large as that domain might be, like architects and product designers and web designers, they have the equipment, the tools to guide, and the attitude to guide this testing process. No good designer is going to design in isolation and throw that in the market and see what's going to happen. Every good designer takes into account a lot of variables, explores a lot of stuff to see what could work, playing and failing continuously before you get to a point where you say, hey, the design is maturing, this is going to work. I think business people and designers are the same. They're people. It's just that business people are not trained to create new stuff, they're trained to make decisions. Designers are not trained in the same way to make decisions. You make decisions in design, right? But you're trained, a big part of the training is to create new stuff. So I think that the big difference is not, are we business people, are we designers? It's just more how we've been trained. And at the end of the day, the most interesting mix is if you're trained in both. If you have the analytical tools, the analytical methods and techniques, and you have the design methods and the design techniques, and you master both. Business schools that are doing more design thinking, design schools that are doing more business thinking. It's happening now. We still need to make it happen on a larger scale, but I think, it's pretty encouraging to see all the different initiatives that are emerging.
My name is Frieder Smulders. I work at the Faculty of Industrial Design Engineering in the Department of Product Innovation Management. And I'm also director of the master program, Strategic Product Design. The SPD program is a program that focuses on the strategic side of product design. Nowadays, of course, we also include service design, so product service design. And then the strategic part. And you can find the strategic part at two phases within the total innovation process, you could say. In the front end, often referred to as fuzzy front end, and in the back end, where you do the product introduction or service introduction to the market. The main aim of the program is to make students literate in acting within the strategic areas of innovation. We teach students to be able to design new business propositions, whatever they might be.
Most MBAs or traditional engineers, they just analyze. But sometimes analysis is not enough. You have to synthesize. And as a designer, you need both. We analyze, we synthesize, come back. So we make steps forward, we make steps backwards. That's the way we progress in our design process. And most people want to have one linear approach. We know it's always that way. They just label it like it's only a mental process, but it's also physical. We are using our hands and we are using our body when we are doing things. Sometimes we role play just by saying, oh, go sit on the upper side, and you go to the upper side and you stand there to see another viewpoint. That's typically what a designer would do. Business school person would never do that. Maybe he will say that, but he will never do it. And we do things.
Yeah, I studied business administration and I graduated, I think, 15 years ago. I'm in Germany one of a very few deans of a design school with no formally trained design background. business education as it used to be, or as I experienced it, was, according to nowadays meters, a bit kind of stupid, because it was linear, it was theoretical, it was exclusive rather than inclusive. But again, I mean, once you graduate, you don't stop learning. We know how to crunch numbers, but the numbers are only something that come from the past. I mean, if you deal with numbers, these numbers come from the past. You can use mathematical models that project in the future, but there's an uncertainty. But I think what these numbers do not, these numbers represent a tendency of what people want, what people did in the past, and how to extrapolate that into the future. But really to understand what people are doing, I think that's a bit of a holy grail. Every company is interested. Designers need more, but like any other discipline, like chemical scientists, they also need to integrate themselves in a, let's call it, business setup, because that's in the end what all our planet is about. It's about business. It's about dealing. I don't like the idea that, for example, business education is dead. Let's make the new creative business class, school, or whatever. I don't know if pressing more complex stuff in one curriculum is the right way.
We all know that design is not learned from the book. So it's not done by just a trick of having 2 courses on creativity. That's not designing. Designing is much more complicated. And that's what I have against this movement, that design thinking is taking outside the world of design, because it takes out most of the time only the creativity part. And that's not what it is. It's much more.
Anyone who says that design thinking is a hype is forgetting that design thinking is not something that's happening now. It's been around for decades, and it's been practiced by people for a very long time. It's been studied for a very long time, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense. The question is design in all its richness and all its potential really helping to deal with the kind of complex issues we're facing these days? And the answer is, of course, partly yes. And we want to know how and where and when. And the answer is partly no. Let's not overhype it. Let's not pretend that design thinking is going to save the world, because it's not.
We designers are very good at moaning about things and moaning, yeah, we are not being understood by the rest of the planet and our contribution. Designers need to go out and demonstrate your value to business, and not to moan, oh, business is not understanding me, and they don't value the contribution of design. No, if business is not understanding what you are doing as a designer, you are doing wrong as a designer. That's the wrong approach. You need to constantly criticize and question yourself and try to experiment around.
By looking at people who practice this every day and who've actually achieved success with it, I think we can learn as a design/business community to become better at what we do.
We never say we are just doing design thinking. We actually combine business thinking with design thinking. That's the value that we provide.
The kind of projects we do, trying to understand a very complex human issue You cannot really do it in a strictly analytical, highly structured, quantitative way. It's not about numbers most of the time, it's about understanding what the person tries to say.
Claro approached us with interest in sort of doing a global research study on ownership. And the topic totally jived with us. We thought that getting at something like ownership, which got to the foundation of people's relationship to stuff, was a crucial thing to be looking at, right? In a moment where the internet was starting to put a lot of those relationships in question and in flux. Intel thinks of itself as much as a computing solutions provider, meaning that our sort of business sits on its core foundation of silicon manufacturing, but thinks about the kinds of devices that need to be enabled, the kinds of services that need to be enabled, the kind of software that sort of enables people's technological lives.
It was a global study. We went to 7 different countries, including India, China, Japan, Brazil. It was looking at a shift in the society, which is something that's also hard to put your finger on. So we tried to do that by speaking to people, by learning people's stories, ways people are tackling changes in ownership. Then people are realising the value of access to experiences and services rather than owning something outright that they have in their hands, and from that moment it usually depreciates in value. Why not have that joy of ownership over many months or years?
For us, workshop is almost like the deliverable, right?
It's one of the important parts of it. Coming from a design background, often you tend to think of a deliverable as something on paper or some finished product, whereas we're very much about presenting ideas and then building on those.
It doesn't have to be the designer who is brainstorming and the business analyst who is going to do the analysis. No, they're brainstorming together and they're doing the analysis together, each bringing in their own perspective, their own experience, and their own brains. So in the end, you're bringing brains together.
What I've really enjoyed about Claro is the fact that they've taken and they're trying to figure out how to take knowledge about the business world and business models and questions that inform new business model innovation with social insights, right, and social understanding.
So there are some companies that are much more research focused and they do a little bit of design and maybe a little bit of business understanding. So they're too much research heavy. And the risk there is that maybe the solutions that they come to are actually not that creative, and that maybe the anchoring in the business reality is missing.
Or they don't interpret the research at all.
Yeah.
They simply say, this is what we observed, which to me is worthless.
Yeah.
In this fast-moving world,
Interpretation.
if you can't interpret, you don't have, I don't think you have a role in the future.
Yeah.
My name is Damien Kernahan from Proto Partners in Service Design. We're here in Sydney, Australia. I'm not a designer. I'm actually a business guy with an MBA with a great love of design. I think one of the biggest things we actually do is help our organisations make really complex issues simple.
For Virgin Mobile, I think experience innovation is one of the key differences for us. Price and product are easily imitated, so I guess the key form of differentiation for us moving forward will be experience innovation, providing great customer experience, particularly as our customers' expectations change. So we realised that we needed some help, some expertise and a fresh perspective to make sure that we were truly taking an outside-in approach to identify the key opportunities for improvement. Proto Partners helped us use a service design approach to ensure that we're identifying the key benefits for our organisation. The challenge that we issued Proto Partners when we started this journey was to help us identify a program of work that would improve our key measure of customer satisfaction. They helped us deliver that in two ways. So the first was to produce a number of artefacts to bring to life our customers and our opportunities for improvement. Things like understanding who our customers are through the use of personas, a detailed map of our current customer journey. The second has been a business case. So, of course, any kind of improvement initiatives require funding, they require resources. So we needed to be able to prove the case for customer experience.
Immersing ourselves in the customer's world is really important. And one of the most powerful things we did in here, we played a 12-minute phone call from a mother who'd had her phone cut off and whose daughter was having an asthma attack and who couldn't contact her family, and she'd been on hold for an hour. And just playing that 12-minute phone call made all the difference in here. So quite often organisations, the traditional approach is to use analytics and rigour and logic to prove your point. We actually flip that on its head and we try to convince our clients emotionally first with something like that. It's very hard for a CEO or senior management to listen to something like that and say, you know, well, so what? Their response always is, we have to fix that, and we have to fix that now.
So I think the key lesson that we've learned in working with Proto partners has been that as a business we need to spend more time focusing on desirability. What do our customers want? What are their expectations? I think by truly designing for desirability, it does create experience innovation that will have an impact to the bottom line.
You actually need, that balance of what customers are looking for, what's possible, but also what's going to pay back. And that's why you need the business guys and the design guys to actually work together. I don't think they can work separately, but if you can bring them together, that's where some magic is, yeah.
There's a big shift between the power to the brands to the power to the people. Yeah? People today are make their own stories, develop their own stories, publish them. So I think that the people are in control at the moment, and that's a big difference after the last few decades. I think we're not return on investment in a traditional way of value of money, but return on investment in brand loyalty and in real connections with the audience.
I think it's also the only way to survive in a world that's changing so fast. And so we have to do the things together and to adjust constantly.
All right, my name is Arne van Oostel, and I run a company called Design Thinkers, and I'm the in-house designer for the Service Innovation Center in Norway. Design thinking for us is a way of, finding the right method to deal with the problem. So first, we help with asking questions. So what is the right question? And looking at the context, etc., etc. And then finding the right tools and the right approach. Philips Design and Design Thinkers collaborated in building Designer DNA. It's a platform for people from large corporations who have the task to innovate and to use new methods and tools like service design tools or design thinking tools. We felt that it was very good to kind of connect them, to bring them together and to have them talk to each other.
Now, the world is changing. Products, things become all interconnected. People expect these things to be interconnected. I think that's where you see that the propositions that we're developing also are changing because it's not a standalone product anymore. The Designer's DNA platform, that is an initiative that was born out of a presentation some of my colleagues gave in Berlin. And actually, what it's all about is that we realized that there was a high desire by people in businesses about learning how to do service design. Service design is an emerging competence, and how can we all learn quicker and faster about how to do this effectively by just talking and sharing the ways of working. And in order to do that and not to reinvent wheels that have been invented somewhere else already, they basically said, well, why don't we try to find a very informal platform where we, without issues of competition, can just exchange thoughts and ideas on how service design can work. So it's very much focused on the competence and the expertise required, not about the application of service design. If you come to service design 5 years from now, that's half of what we now call product design, that effort is going to be reflected by at least as much service design. Well, maybe there's another opportunity for another kind of designer. You know, we talked about the designer as the businessman, but then the designer as the connector between, where, you know, A makes connections, looking at problems and say, well, this is my company, this is the problem. What other organization, groups, companies are part of this ecosystem? And then, you know, and then being the real connector, and you go out as your design function to make literal connections with these businesses and see if you can make something happen.
It's not design thinking or service design or what have you that's going to be the answer, but it's all part of this searching.
Design, that ability to, you know, solve a problem, to make something better, is a very human activity. I think design helps organisations to get much better insights and become much more user-centred than they otherwise would, to really kind of bring to life the experiences of their customers to them, for them to experience themselves and understand. I think it offers a space within which people can be much more creative, can imagine new ideas. It offers a place for those ideas to be prototyped, tested, and developed and specified in a much kind of faster and a more engaging manner.
We were approached by Camden Council as they were understanding how they could host a learning network to share best practice around how to engage older people in the design of services. They wanted to do something slightly different, and we worked with them to understand how they could move from bringing teams from around the country together simply to share PowerPoint slides and stories with each other, to the point where actually people could start to develop practical strategies and practical tools together to take back to their organisations and propagate new practices more directly.
I think there is definitely an observable appetite and movement towards ways of thinking about service design delivery in local government, which in that sense is probably unstoppable. I think what I'm observing is that people are having an experience of design and designers, and that is changing their view of their own job and their own role. So in that sense, there's no going back. So they go, even if they move on to another job, they've kind of been, their mindset has been shifted a little bit.
The way that we try to solve problems now is that we try to apply proven solutions from the past onto these problems. But because the problems are different, the solutions no longer work. And so what design brings to that is about thinking differently.
It allows us to spend some time comfortably exploring. That exploration phase that defers the moment in which you actually define the problem, I think is really important. There's often a sort of knee-jerk kind of reaction to define the problem. I think what design allows us to do is experiment with not only multiple solutions but also many problems to see which is the right one to pursue.
I guess within the business community, a lot of emphasis is placed on the analytical side of things, and I think what we're finding now is that companies are realizing that they need to balance that off with the more creative, more design-led approaches to understand what they don't know about a situation, to imagine solutions they hadn't thought of before, to change and find new ways of doing things.
Design really needs business to focus, to know which problems to solve, to know which objects to design or which environments to design. It's really about working together, solving these problems, creating this value for people. And in that sense, design without business is a pointless exercise. But there's more. Business also needs design because problems are getting more and more complex. These are the kind of problems you can't manage your way out of. You can only design your way out of them. That's a quote by Martin Neumeyer that I really love. It's not either design as a separate thing and it is business as a separate thing. No. Design is part of business. Design will sort of grow out of its role of being exclusive and being a separate department in a company to more a skill set or a mindset that you look for in people, whether they're designers or not.
It's just human nature, and it's just contributing to making this place a better place, and don't want to sing Michael Jackson songs now.
We design this world. It's a big problem sometimes, but it's a great job to do.